Government shutdown. It is still in effect. Today was the day that they had to square things away, figure it out. So far, that has not happened. Starting tomorrow, November 1st, you will see a little bit of chaos in the streets if this does not get ironed out. One of the reasons for that is EBT, welfare, food stamps, SNAP benefits, these kinds of things, as far as we can tell, are going to be out of commission. There have been a number of videos on TikTok and Instagram and X of individuals saying, we're going to rob white people. We're going to rob grocery stores. There was one video where a certain individual said, not just we're going to rob white people, but we're going to eat them. That was actually a video, believe it or not. I retweeted it. So I have evidence on my timeline if you'd like to go and see it. Sadly, I'm not exaggerating. There is chaos right now. The market is continuing to push up with all-time highs. But even with that, there's some fear in the streets. Is it a bubble? Is it going to pop? What's going to happen? So there's a lot to talk about when we look at the overall economic landscape here in these United States. That's what we're going to be talking about in today's episode. I'll mention one last thing here in the cold open. Currently, we have 42 million people, was the recent data, that are on EBT benefits. 42 million people. I believe that's over 12% of the entire country. It's like 12.5%. So currently, when it comes to planning for November and buying a Thanksgiving dinner, we have over 10%, well over 10% of the country that is expecting you and I to buy that for them. And many, not all, but many, I mean thousands of individuals are going on social media saying that if we do not buy their Thanksgiving dinner, then they will, at best, steal from you, which through the government, they've been stealing for decades from you, but they will steal from you without the government, in a vigilante sort of fashion, and at worst, physically harm you. I have already tweeted out to all my followers, and I have also instructed my wife for the foreseeable future, no grocery shopping. Everything has to be ordered online. We can go to Costco if we want, but I have to come with you, and I will be in the state of Texas legally carrying. This is what it's come to in these United States of America, in our economic house of cards. Is there any certainty? Is there anything in our economy that is sure, that is secure, that's stable? What does God's word have to say about these things? Where should Christians be investing? What should they be hoping in? Is there anything that we can rely upon? That's the topic for today's episode. Tune in now. All right, welcome back to the show. It is Friday, October 31st. I'm going to say two things up front. Happy Halloween and also happy Reformation Day. We have many Eastern Orthodox and Catholic followers, but it is Reformation Day and I am Reformed. And so I'm going to have to say happy Reformation Day. I understand if you need to put in the chat right now, Rare, Joel L. I will take it. I will own it. But I am a Protestant. And I am proud of my Protestant heritage. I love my Catholic friends. I love, not quite as much, but also some love for my Eastern Orthodox friends. I prefer Catholicism to Eastern Orthodoxy because I think they both have massive theological problems, but at least one is Western. At least one seems to have some kind of history with our European heritage. The other one, not so much, but we love our Catholic friends and we love our Eastern Orthodox friends, but we are here with Right Response Ministries, distinctly Christian and willing to be co-belligerents in a large tent as we labor together in the realm of politics and the realm of culture, but theologically, when it comes to matters of the church, ecclesiology, these kinds of things, we are unapologetically Protestant. So happy Reformation Day, but also happy Halloween, right? All Hallows Eve. Right? All Saints Day. There is a heritage there as well, and I don't want to completely throw out the baby with the bathwater. The fact that the devil has hijacked, and it really is the devil, demons and the devil have hijacked Halloween. There's no question about that. But the fact that the devil has taken something doesn't mean that he ultimately owns it. And it doesn't mean that there shouldn't be some kind of full court press from Christians to try to redeem that which has been sullied. So I will say both happy Halloween and happy Reformation Day. That being established now, I'd like to introduce our guest for our topic today as we look at the month of November potentially being a bit crazy when we come to economic things and welfare and our country and racial tensions and all these different things. There's a lot going on. Our guest today is Bill Armour. And what we've done is we started, I believe this is our third time now. So a couple months ago, we decided, you know what, once a month, we're not going to do it every day. We're not going to become, a exclusive, investing market update podcast. That's not who we are. That's not what we do. But when it comes to wealth, right, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. But money itself, right, not the love of money, not greed, but money itself, being wise with our investments, these kinds of things, Christians building an inheritance that we can give to our children's children, as the book of Proverbs talks about. This is a part of the Christian life. And so we decided that it merits at least one episode, one live stream a month to give a full market update, talk about the economy, and talk about Christians building wealth for future generations so that we can win the world for Jesus Christ. We don't love money, but as we seek to expand, push for the crown rights of Jesus, it involves money. So we don't love money, but pushing for the kingdom of Christ here on earth in this temporal age involves money. And so we want to be wise, good stewards. So we decided once a month we're going to talk about these kinds of things. And we've decided to bring a solid Christian brother that we've come to know and love, Bill Armour from Genesis Gold, as a representative from their group, their organization, to come once a month and join us. Bill, thanks for coming on the show.
Pleasure. Great to be here. And just, as you were talking there, one thing that did pop into my head is just obviously, Satan, the father of lies there. The biggest power is just, confusing and manipulating and destroying. But I would think about that in terms of obviously what we've seen with Halloween and how that's changed. And I was just thinking, how do I contextualize that with money? And you're right. It's not that money is bad in and of itself, but the love of money. And beyond that, the way even our financial system, every civilization in history has to utilize money in some way, form, one way or another. But how does that become destroyed and corrupted with the fiat system as a whole and whatnot? So I was just kind of playing with that in my head a little bit. But it's just interesting how we see that in every facet of our lives is what God intends, and then obviously the way that has been distorted by the enemy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Fiat currency, the ability, centralized banking, the Fed being able to just have their hand on the lever of interest rates, being able to print money out of thin air, usury, all these different things. It really is, we've gotten used to it. But if you step back and try to be objective and you look in from the outside, it's absolutely insane. And it's not just crazy or ignorant or dumb or foolish but it also is, from a moral standpoint, it really is wicked. Yeah. Our economic system is wicked, right? The fact that people have refrigerators now with a screen on it in the morning, sending them ads to buy things, right? That is not the timeless principles of private property ownership. That is not the kind of capitalism that our founders would have spoken of. That is a crony capitalism that makes socialism look appetizing, by comparison. Like some of the guys, young guys who follow this show, they're like, hey, National Socialism doesn't seem like the worst idea. And I'm a bit sympathetic. When you look at not capitalism from 50 years ago, certainly not 150 years ago, right, but you look at what it's become today, and it's like, yeah, I can see, even if it's the wrong instinct, I can see, and I'm not going to just disparage these young men. I see why they are considering certain things, because we have allowed greed and consumption and wickedness and usury and all these things to have a stranglehold on our economy and our country. So you're right. I agree.
You said in your cold open, is anything sure anymore? And I think we could add something to the list. There's death and taxes. Those have been kind of spoken of as a classic. In life, you're going to have death and you're going to have taxes. And I'm actually going to nominate a third one, and that's going to be a federal judge in some state that, has some of the fewest residents in the land, ordering the executive branch, so the judicial branch, ordering the executive branch to do something. And as of about 30 minutes ago, a federal judge, a woman who is not an American, we'll talk about this on the back end, has now ordered the administration to find the money for EBT benefits. And really, to your point, Bill, to zoom out a little bit, so what's going on here with the government shutdown we shouldn't think of as ending all issuing of debt, all money, and all activities, right? The government, for example, Medicare, Social Security, those are actually still being paid out. If you could think of a family's budget, think of rent or a mortgage, think of food, and think of health insurance. Those are core items that if your family's trying to save money, it's not as though we just, let's go ahead and just go without food for the month. Those are core items. However, Netflix, Hulu, food subscription services, those might be the things that you cancel. And so when it comes to the government, a lot of times government funding through a yearly appropriations that's passed by Congress is also tied with a thing called the debt ceiling. We're in so much debt and we're issuing debt continually because we've been in a deficit. I think it was Bill Clinton. I don't remember the year. It would have been, I think, 2002, 2001. That was the last time the federal budget was actually balanced.
Right. Rare Bill Clinton W.
He was good fiscally.
He was.
Do you know who blew it through the roof too? Reagan.
Yeah.
So
Reagan. With Reagan, I want to say rare Reagan L, but I feel like I have to say
wouldn't be appropriate.
Common Reagan L, whether it's no fault divorce or amnesty laws, or Reagan, I've said it before, but he truly encapsulates the spirit of the boomer, right? Like it's like, I'm going to sweep the country with a conservative vote, but then push certain amnesty laws and policies to where no one will ever be able to achieve what I have achieved after me. It really is. You can't even write, a story like that. It really is remarkable. Real quick, I noticed in the chat, people are asking, I think people want a sense of the EBT, what are we talking about in terms of dollar amounts?
Right.
I've looked into this some, depending on how many kids an individual has. If you have like 5 kids, for instance, you're talking, or more, maybe 5, 6, 7 kids, you're talking $3,000-$4,000 a month per person. So you're talking about, it's not just like, hey, it's a canned food drive, for those who are the poorest of the poor and the destitute. No, you're talking, I've seen the videos, you're like with 2 grocery carts, going through the store, loaded up with, Doritos and all these, and it's thousands and thousands of dollars every single month per family.
Right.
And so it's a lot of money. It's a big deal. It's a system that has been broken for a very long time. And the chickens may be coming home to roost. What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that the way it's been situated is a problem. And just, I think like anything, this is something when Doge went out there to find, fraud, waste, and abuse, there's effectively infinite fraud, waste, and abuse in our government. I don't think it was ever decided that they were going to get everything, but hopefully they got a lot of it. But I think this is probably a place where it's so hard to verify so much of this because it's such a big problem. Anytime you have federal programs, we're encompassing, hundreds of millions of people, or at least, tens of millions that actually access this program. To verify every single person and whatnot is a really, really tough task. And so we almost understand, I think we have to understand that some of that is going to be used incorrectly or whatnot. So we know it's there. I think maybe the questions would just be, how much and what does that look like?
Right. And remember, EBT, SNAP, so the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, that's only one part of a lot of assistance that the government gives. Healthcare and housing are their big ones. So to your point, SNAP it's about $90 billion. It settled down from its peak of $110 billion annually worth of aid during the pandemic era. So it's come down a little bit since then, and it's $90 billion. But that $90 billion is not coming alone. You have people on all 3 forms. So it's not just like, I need a little bit of help making it on food. They're also on federally subsidized healthcare. Oh, I've got healthcare and I've got food. I still can't make ends meet, and I need help with housing. So they have housing vouchers. The government is paying for their insurance. And actually, I mentioned the family, so the family has its core items. The money for SNAP is actually still available. So what the government can do is, when it gets to the point that it's running into deficit, it can add on debt. This is by the Treasury issuing new securities. So the Treasury comes out and it says, we're going to sell these, be they bonds, 5, 10-year, 15-year. We're going to sell these bonds. That's going to bring money in. 10 years, obviously, we'll have to pay it back. But for right now, we can distribute the money. That's why, again, Social Security and Medicare, they haven't been shut down. However, for all of this money that goes out, billions every single month, there's also billions in administrative costs. And that's the part that's not funded. So states and the federal government share 50-50 the cost of administrating the program. But when the government shutdown happened, there's no longer any money apportioned to paying for the administrative costs, to get the money out there, to attempt to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse. So you have the money, it's been there, and until we hit our $41 trillion, that's what we raised it to back in July with the big, beautiful bill. Until we hit our $41 trillion debt ceiling, the money is there, but what's going on right now in the shutdown, there's no money to pay, I think it's the USDA, that actually disperses the food, that actually transfers the money. Because remember, the states themselves administer it with federal money. And so the program is so big and so bulky, it costs billions of dollars just to distribute the billions of dollars every single month, and we've run out of money to pay for that. There's lots of waste and abuses to it. I do want to pick up on one, though, and it's disability. So an individual can't be on SNAP if they're able-bodied, they're not elderly or retired, and they are able to work. They have to work at least 20 hours a week, which is not much. I mean, that's scraping the bottom of the barrel. Like, please, you're a 25-year-old man. Could you work 20 hours in a week? But if you're not doing that, one of the ways that you can get out of that is say, I am disabled. And I was in the military, there are people that come home and they've lost both legs or something has happened to them. They genuinely can't work. And there are provisions. The family and the church are actually probably first in that line for the government. However, some of these categories for disability, one of them, according to federal guidelines, is ADHD, attention hyperactivity deficit disorder. You could go to the government and say, I have ADHD, and it's preventing me from holding down long-term employment, and I need money for food. And you could indefinitely, an able-bodied man, ADHD is not a physical, it would be mental if it even exists at all.
Highly debatable.
If it exists at all. And you could say, I need food assistance, and I need this assistance for the rest of my life. Chronic depression and anxiety are other categories. So forget even individuals that aren't working, forget individuals that are gaming the system. Someone put it up there, it's very well known. What people will do is take the cards. So say you spent $3,000 on groceries, but you have 2 kids. So there's another $2,000 to $3,000 on it. Well, they'll sell it in the community. Hey, you give me, I'll give you money for this, and you can go get your hair and your nails done. You can go pay for luxury items like this. So these things are traded around with different people that have them.
King Jared in the chat, he just said ADHD. Whoa, I didn't realize that I was disabled. God bless you. Yep.
And so that's just one of the abuses. And you're talking about 42 million Americans, as you said in the opening. Utah is actually one of the lowest states. I think it's like 4%.
Well, real quick, let's talk about, so 42 million Americans.
42 million Americans.
Yeah, 42 million people, okay? But that's another thing that, Wes, if you could take just a moment and explain it to the listener. Out of these 42 million Americans, and if you're listening, on a podcast and not watching visually, I'm doing like violent air quotes as I say American, the word American, like 42 million, but it's a fairly sizable percentage of these individuals that they weren't born in America, questionably not even American citizens, so not even paperwork Americans, much less American Americans.
Right.
Can you walk us through that at all?
I'm just going to play, this is a 1-minute clip from Rob Finnerty on Newsmax, where he does a great job of breaking down with visuals just the scale of the aid we're paying actually to foreigners for food and other assistance.
Wow.
There are 42 million people in this country that need food stamps on a weekly basis. And we're saying people deliberately instead of Americans, because most of the people that are on food stamps aren't even from this country. 45% of Afghanistan immigrants are on food stamps, 42% of Somali immigrants, 34% of every immigrant from Iraq, 23% of Haitians, 59% of all illegal aliens are collecting food stamps, meaning that most of the people getting food stamps from the U.S. government and the U.S. taxpayer are not even Americans. Think about that. And we didn't know about any of this before the government shutdown started, but thanks to Democrats, we can confirm tonight that millions of Joe Biden illegal aliens, people who crossed the border when Joe was president, are now collecting food stamps from a program funded by hardworking American taxpayers.
Wow.
So you're working hard, you're paying your taxes. It's not enough, mind you. The government is still printing money, inflating your money away. And that money is going to pay for a lot of people that are not even Americans.
Not just, and some of those people might actually merit it.
Right.
But many of the true Americans are actually just, they're making up an excuse. Not all, but many. The Bible says if you don't work, you don't eat. That's a biblical principle. And so you have already Americans abusing the system, but then come to find out, a ton of them aren't even Americans. They're foreigners who aren't even citizens. And so you're literally, your government is putting everything the government does. You have to realize this. It's all coercion, right? This is not charity, because people will say, well, aren't Christians supposed to be charitable? Aren't they supposed to be generous? It's not charity when I'm being told to give to someone else at gunpoint. Everything that the government does is coercive, right? Everything the government does is ultimately at gunpoint. And you might say that's hyperbole. That's not true. If I say, for these reasons, based off of my spiritual theological convictions, I know that this portion of my taxes goes to pay for things that are unbiblical, like feeding an able-bodied person who is not willing to work when the Bible says, if you don't work, you don't eat. And so based off of that religious conviction, I am not going to pay this portion of my taxes. What do you think happens? Well, you get a letter, then you get a phone call, and you're like, nope, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to hold to my conviction. Eventually, someone shows up at your house, and you say, go away. Eventually, they show up with guards, right? And you say, oh, I'm not coming out. You can't take me. Eventually, there will be a gun pointed at your head. So it's not hyperbole when I say everything the government does, it does it at gunpoint. And I'm not even saying that that's bad so long as the government does things that are righteous, right? God actually gave the sword to the government. So the government is the only legitimate institution that has a monopoly, a God-given monopoly on violence. The government is allowed to bear the sword. But when the government coerces at gunpoint things that are directly in contradiction to God's word, then it's tyranny. And you don't have the ability to resist that without having a gun eventually down the line. Lots of procedures and lots of different, this phone call and the letters and this person shows, but eventually it will be a gun, and eventually you will go to jail if you don't pay for those who are able-bodied but refuse to work when the Bible says that they shouldn't eat. And not only that, that's for the American side of the equation, but in addition to that, you have to carry Haiti on your back. You have to carry Afghanistan on your back. You have to carry Iraq on your back. Non-citizens, not even born in our country, some of them that have only been here for weeks or potentially months, and you have to carry them on your back. You need to know that you live in a wicked nation and that you are constantly being robbed. And that's just in terms of your taxation. And then you look at the other side of the equation, printing money out of thin air, the inflation, which is, another form of taxation. So we are in dire straits, and it is difficult for Christians to be able to have the wisdom necessary to navigate the corrupt economic system that we currently live in, so that they can actually obey the scripture that says a good man or a wise man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. So at the end of this segment, what I want to do is I want to hand it to you, Bill. What do you think about those things? What can we do? And in the second segment, we're gonna really focus on our guests and giving us even more practical wisdom of how to navigate the things that are going on. And we've done this the last couple of times. I can't help myself. I think it's fun. We'll give the disclaimer. We could be wrong. We don't have a crystal ball, but I think in the second segment, it would be fun to give some predictions of what's going to happen in November. Is the government shutdown going to persist? How will that affect the economy? Those kinds of things. So, Bill, everything that Wes and I have said, we've got all the data out. We got our video out. We got, all these things. Give us, take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you need. Give us a response, and then we'll go to our first commercial break.
Yeah. So, one thing that sticks out to me is just a reminder of it. A lot of these people, you look at the countries that they're coming from, these are not people who are coming here and using this aid as a stopgap, and they're excited to be in this country and they love this country. A lot of these people are the same ones we see in these anti-American riots, holding up flags of other countries as they take money from people that are working. And then they don't want to get a job because they don't want to lose those benefits. So there's this cycle of somehow we're paying people who hate us to be here, And when we accept that, and I think that is unacceptable. It's the definition of unacceptable. And you're right, it's not hyperbole to say that you really do have a gun to your head on this. And that wouldn't even be charity, even if it was, because if you don't have the opportunity to make a decision, no one could ever call you a generous person if you're forced to give everything away. You're not generous, you've just been stolen from. And so that's really, I think, the crux of this argument here. And there's, I mean, even just sort of the obvious pieces of who this goes to, there's so many workarounds and subsets of these benefits. We talk about, like in Washington, there's SNAP, but then there's programs even under SNAP that if you don't qualify for SNAP because of things like your immigration status, et cetera, guess what? They're still going to take care of you. So this exists throughout the entire country. And it's a methodology that creates people who we are not self-sustaining, that we are sustaining, that then hate the country that they live in. And the only way that they can keep that is if they find some way to pressure or push voting initiatives that allow them to have these policies. So there's kind of this thing that we saw in the last administration. That's why the borders were wide open, and that's why into this administration people were shocked at how quickly the borders closed. That I remember just a year ago they were saying, well, it's not that easy to close down the border to stop and this is so difficult, such a complicated issue. And here we are, about 12 months later, and it's like, we've made tremendous progress. It's really halted. And the answer is they were putting people in positions to move that initiative forward. And a lot of this damage will be done for years and years to come because they're here and it's hard to get rid of them. We've done a tremendous job. I think President Trump's done a tremendous job getting rid of some of that, but obviously a lot of that is going to stick. A lot of that is here for the long run. My wife is from Michigan, and so obviously we see this in like Dearborn, where entire parts of a state have been changed and not for the better. So I just go back to that this is fraud, waste, and abuse in a big scale. Improper payments represent about 15% of all EBT benefits, meaning that when they look back, they say, oh, maybe we gave that person too much, or they shouldn't have got benefits and whatnot. Historically, those numbers are closer to 1.5%, 2%. So it's not like this is a problem that's always existed. This is actually, in the scale and sense this is a relatively new problem. And I think it speaks to a wider problem, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this in the next segment, but it speaks to a wider problem of our entire economic frame, right? That exists, and there's different pieces that add into that, social, political, et cetera. But when you break it all down, the debt problem, for instance, we're just kicking the can down the road because there's no easy way to solve these problems. And so my thought with all of that is we need less government intervention, not more. We need to empower people to go out and earn their own money, not to provide for them. Jesus, didn't heal and then, tell them to continue begging. Heal, pick up your mat and walk. That's kind of the idea here as Christians, I think, that we approach this with, is that we need to empower people to, produce, not empower people to be takers. As a Christian, obviously we want to be givers, not takers, as a net. So just some of my thoughts on that.
Well said. Real quick, just looking at the chat, people, I see they're commenting on President Trump. And so I just want to go on record as saying two things. Number one, President Trump, some people in the chat are saying, well, he's done a lot of good. Yes, he did close the border. This was probably in relation to Bill talking about closing the border and those kinds of things. Trump has done a lot of good, for which I'm grateful. And I want to do my very best as a Christian man to honor the scripture by honoring the king. He is, whether you like it or not, for all intents and purposes, he would hold that role. Peter in his epistle say, honor the king. So I want to honor and respect Trump. I'm certainly praying for him, and I am grateful for a lot of good that he did. On the flip side, he has closed the door, but we have not gotten even close to the mass deportations that we were promised. And as much as I appreciate a good poster on the internet, with Homeland Security, posting Lord of the Ring memes, Pippin, there won't be a Shire, and the orcs have to go back. I appreciate that as much as the next guy, probably even more. But I retweeted, it's not Homeland Security, what is
DHS,
it?
Department of Homeland Security.
Right. So they had like a Lord of the Rings, Pippin, there won't be a Shire. And everyone's like, are you kidding me? Why are you blackpilling when the DHS is, posting Lord of the Rings, And so I retweeted and said, I appreciate a good post. And this is a great post. However, could we please actually have some action? And whether you like it or not, whether you're MAGA or love Trump, there needs, I think, to be some respect, some appreciation. On the flip side, there also needs to be some honesty and some good old-fashioned chimping out and admitting that right now we're getting a lot more posting on the internet than we're actually getting in terms of deportations. I understand that it took financing, that it takes infrastructure, that it takes hiring. It took the big, beautiful bill and $40 trillion in debt and all these things. And if all that, as bad as it is, actually lends towards millions have to go back, then praise God. But it has not happened yet. There have been self-deportations. I'm grateful for that. I think the latest numbers, Trump is now wrapping up his first year of this second administration. And I think we're looking at 2.5 million self-deportations and around 1 million deportations. So you're looking at about 3.5. And I would simply respond by saying those are rookie numbers. We got to beef those numbers up. So
let me add one piece to this. I mentioned that a judge has ordered Trump on the food stamp side of things to find a way. The judge's name, the U.S. District Judge's name, Indira Talwani. She said the steps involved, so the steps to find funding for this, involve finding an equitable way of reducing benefits. So not only are foreigners getting the majority of this aid, then we elected someone, and one of the byproducts of his policies has been a government shutdown in which we're wasting less money. And a foreigner is coming in and saying, no, you must find a way, you must find the money. And this will be another example. Will Trump say, pound sand? We are not paying this money. It is billions of dollars in administrative costs until the government is funded, until Congress, the constitutional way of finding a remedy, until Congress comes up with a remedy, we will not be paying it. Or will a bunch of people see their EBT cards loaded up to go buy Diet Coke? I don't know. I'm rooting for Trump to make the right choice. But again and again, we've seen up to the year so far, fine, we'll do it.
Yeah, we've
obey.
I think that's well said. We've had a lot of good things from Trump, and I don't want to I don't want us to not be grateful at all. But it is just a fact that although there have been some good things, what we have objectively not had thus far is a crossing the Rubicon moment. Eventually, if Trump is going to have a lasting legacy, he's going to have to cross the Rubicon and say, enough is enough. The judges, the mayors, the governors, not just a sternly worded tweet. No, armed guards, throwing them in jail. These are traitors to the United States. Thousands of civil officials over the last 5-6 years have committed treason. They need to be rounded up and thrown in prison. This judge, you are not an American. You don't get rounded up and thrown in prison. You get rounded up, put on a boat, and sent back. They need to be naturalized and deported. That has to happen. And if that doesn't happen, then as much good as Trump is doing, it's still way too much bark and not enough bite. He needs to be the American Caesar. He must cross the Rubicon. He even tweeted out, I mean, we've got the president of the United States, Napoleon, tweeting, right? He who saves his country violates no law. Yes and amen. So let's see it. Let's see it. I'm going to call him to account. At the same time, though, I am going to pray that by God's grace that he would be that man. Personally, if you're asking me, what's your prediction? What do you think? I think that Trump is not that man. I believe that the great man, by the grace of God, is coming, and that Trump is a precursor, that he's the best president that we've had in my lifetime, bar none, but that he's still not quite that guy, and that guy, in God's grace, will eventually come, and that Trump will be looked at historically as a precursor for that guy. However, there's still 3 years left to go, and even though that may be my prediction, I'm going to pray, love hopes all things, I'm going to pray that God would make Trump half the man that my enemies think he is. That's my prayer. Let's go to our commercial break, and we will come right back with more. The silver is mine, and the gold is mine, declares the Lord of hosts. Yet your retirement dollars keep shrinking daily as Washington prints money out of thin air. Genesis Gold Group aligns financial guidance with godly principles when others serve only profit. Their faith-centered approach to Gold IRAs stands apart in an industry that has forgotten what true stewardship actually means. Why gamble your family's future on Wall Street's paper promises? Your 401k and IRA deserve better protection. Genesis Gold Group transforms your vulnerable retirement accounts into physical gold, something real, something tangible, something that God created with inherent value. Their faith-driven experts walk you through every step, helping you shield your life's work from the financial storms up ahead. No high-pressure tactics, no hidden fees, just guidance rooted in timeless principles of sound stewardship. So the decision is simple. Watch your retirement evaporate through inflation or secure it in God's precious metal. Take action now. Go and visit rightresponseBibleGold.com. You can visit today for your free book, The Bible and Gold, and join the thousands of believers who sleep soundly knowing their future is anchored in something unshakable. Again, that's rightresponseBibleGold.com, safeguarding your legacy with God's timeless treasure.
The danger of centralized power is often represented by the word king. As Americans, we hate the word king. Civilian ownership of body armor is about helping people to have increased power to resist tyrants and criminals. And so, Armored Republic is about helping you to preserve your God-given rights to the honor of the Lord Jesus Christ, because He is the King of Kings, and He governs kings and He will judge them. This is Armored Republic, and in a republic, there is no king but Christ. We are free craftsmen, and we are honored to be your armorsmith of choice.
When it comes to your financial future, are you planning forward or backwards from your desired results? What type of financial culture do you want to create for your family and for your children's children? We are not called to be wise as doves. Therefore, simpleton planning simply won't cut it. Joe Garrissey helps families develop and implement a long-term culture of excellent financial management. He starts with your goals, your tithing plan, your retirement, and the legacy that you want to build for your generations. And then he works backwards to build a real actionable plan to get your family on track. Now, many of my personal friends have benefited from the financial wisdom of Joe Garrissey that he's shared for their specific situations. Do you want to work with someone who strives for alpha with your investing, hates taxes, and brokers insurance? Start planning smart. Call Joe Garrissey at 615-767-2555. Again, that's 615-767-2555. Or you can find him by going to backwardsplanningfinancial.nm.com. Again, that's backwardsplanningfinancial.in as in Nancy, M as in ministries.com.
Well, Bill, last month when we spoke, one of the big things that we focused on was the labor market. It can be great if the SPY is at an all-time high, but practically speaking, if people don't have jobs and those earnings are driven by AI, by automation and other things, it doesn't actually practically make your life better. I'm going to read some layoff announcements and I'm going to give it to you. And I want to hear if you still think kind of the job numbers. We actually don't have the job numbers from October because the government shut down. And if I'm correct, the August job numbers, they were revised after our conversation. So they were already low, and I believe they got revised downward even further. And so job numbers were not looking good. Last the government was putting them out. They're no longer putting them out. And there's been a number of recent layoff announcements. I'm just going to read the top 5, but if you're watching, you can see a list of about 15 companies. The biggest layoffs, UPS, 48,000 employees. Amazon, up to 30,000 employees. Intel, 24,000 employees. Nestle, 16,000 employees. Accenture, 11,000 employees. There's another 10 companies listed. Big time layoffs are going on. Again, stocks themselves, stock market.
I wanted to draw that. So
high.
Amazon just produced its earnings. And granted, Amazon has been lagging behind the Mag 7 and some other major companies. Amazon is still was not at all-time highs, was like actually down, kind of beaten down from where it was in February of this year. I think in February it was about $242 was the share price, and then it was like basically hovering in this 220 to 227 range for the last month, 2 months. And then they just produced earnings after the bell yesterday, and they didn't just pop a little bit. I think they went up over 12%. It's like 12.6% spike in after earnings, and they've held that today. So it wasn't just this pop and then immediate sell-off. It got in the pre-market all the way up this morning, in the pre-market all the way up to like 200, from 224 to like 252.50, $252.50 share price for Amazon. Which is massive, and I think it finished the day around like 246. Yeah. So, yep. So holding a good, a good $20 to $25 above its previous share price, which is a new all-time high. But my point, the reason why I'm saying that is couple those two things together, two pieces of information. What I just gave you about Amazon in terms of its earnings, right? Its revenue, what it's producing. And then what Wes just gave you in terms of Amazon and its hiring, or the lack thereof. So Amazon reports they laid off 30,000 employees. And then Amazon produces a monster earnings report, beating all expectations, more profitable than ever before. And I think that really does, right? I know that's just one company, but I really do think that serves as kind of an encapsulation of what's going on in our economy at large right now, that corporations are becoming wealthier than ever. And I know that this has been going on for a long time, but not to this degree. I think we're now seeing, we're seeing this principle that has been occurring for quite some time, but we're seeing it now on steroids. Corporations with more benefits, more wealth, more production than ever before. But the average American worker, more displaced, more oppressed, poor, can't afford anything. This seems to be where we are. Bill, what do you think?
Yeah, I think in this the AI part of that, because it frames why those layoffs occurred and why the stock price jumped so dramatically, is that they say we can accomplish the same thing with 30,000 less workers, because a lot of that can be replaced with AI. But I think that's a testament to what we've talked about even in previous conversations, which is that AI has some potential to do positive things, but it also has the potential to massively reshape every person's life in a negative way in this country. Those 30,000 people that lost their jobs are not better off, even though Amazon's stock price jumped up. And you look at, actually, we are at a point now when hiring plans are the lowest they've been for this year since 2009. This is with the exception, I should qualify that, with the exception of 2020 with COVID. But we're in a position here where stock prices are going through the roof, and that's great. And if you got money in the market, that's phenomenal. But at some point, you have to take a look at this and say, does this make sense? Does this match to me with what I'm seeing? Companies are laying people off. No one wants to hire, but the stock price keeps going up. And there is this disassociation, I want to call it, from reality between stock price, what people expect things to go to and what they are, because we have grown accustomed to, it's just all right. Things work out. It's fine. And that was essentially through COVID in a lot of ways. Immediately, it was pretty quick when things jumped back, when the market rebounded from the initial cut, said, we'll figure it out. But at one point, there comes a reality when the market is so expecting things to not be a problem, for people to not have money to spend, to not be able to spend it, but they'll figure it out. We'll print more money. We'll do whatever it might be. But at some point, there's a precipice we reach, and we fall into that where it's not all right. And we do see companies all of a sudden miss earnings. And no matter how many people they lay off, they can't fix a broken economy, which is what we have right now. But these are Band-Aids. Okay, well, we'll find a way to get rid of 30,000 people, and that'll make us a little more profitable. And eventually you run out of Band-Aids, because this is not something we solve with a Band-Aid. This is a massive fundamental problem with our economy, be it the debt, be it a lot of different things. I mean, even just the structure of the way, capitalism is set up right now, where a few companies dominate the market. I think the top 20 companies in the S&P are 50% of all market share. So
Right.
that's a problem. That's a problem, because what that means is that mom and pops, small businesses are being squeezed out, and large companies can afford to do that. They can afford to take losses in order to push the little guys out until they drown them, and then they start making money again. So
Right.
all of this to say, a lot of these things are not good for the average everyday American. But if you're looking at the market, maybe that's fine for you. But at some point, I do believe we see that rubber band snap, and that's where you're really in trouble if you're relying on that.
Yes, very well said. I agree with everything that you just said. I'm seeing people in the comments, the market's going to crash. Safest prediction of all time. Because, if you don't specify when, because it will happen. It has happened many times before. It will happen again. But a couple things that I wanted to point out. One, the market can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent. And in both directions. Market can go down longer than it seems possible. It can go up longer than it seems possible. If I had to predict, I said, we'll give a little predictions here. I do think that there could be a serious correction, potentially crash, in the near future. That said, I don't see it. A lot of people said the SPY is going to come up. These were people back with the tariff scare back in April, and they said it's going to be a V-shaped recovery. We're going to get all the way up to like 690 on the SPY, and then that's it, and we're done. I'm going to go ahead and go on record and say I think those guys are wrong. We've touched like 688, 689, right around there. Earlier this week, we came down a little bit because of stuff between Trump and Xi Jinping. With China, although that's getting resolved. So, Trump came out and he's like 1 billion% tariffs on China, and then he's already backed down off of that, which was, that was expected. Big scare right now, although the market has stayed very resilient, but we came a little bit off of some of the highs, was in relation to Fed Powell. He said, good afternoon. And so we got our 25 basis point, rate cut. But then Fed Powell came out, and the big thing that he said, besides just simply good afternoon and him just seeing his face on a screen, he really does. He is a destroyer of markets. I have to admit, I personally do not appreciate Fed Powell. I can't wait for him to step down. But in addition to that, he also said the big thing that scared people was he said, all right, you got your 25 basis point. And the market is priced in. I think it was polling at like 85, 86%, close to 90% that people were betting on, another 25 basis point for December. And so, you got your September 25 and then October 25. There won't be a rate cut in November, but then, in December. So 3 rate cuts this year. That's what the market has been expecting. And Fed Powell said, I believe, and I'm gonna be, this is a quote or very close to it. He said, a 25 basis point rate cut is not guaranteed for December. Far from it. And those words right there, far from it. We started to pull back. Now, honestly, given that, we've still been pretty resilient. But the point, my point that I'm trying to make is this. I don't think we're going to hit 690. We've already kind of hit it. I don't think we're going to hit that and then just go into some crazy crash. I think that the market can remain irrational, including irrational gains, longer than you expect. I think that we're going to continue to see things go up, but eventually everything that Bill was saying, the one thing that I want to add to that is that Amazon and all these companies, Google, whatever, NVIDIA, they can replace people with robots. They can. They actually can. And they can have AI do, because honestly, we have this managerial class, not just in our government, but in our economy. You have a bunch of people who bring virtually zero productivity to the company that they work for. HR, right? HR departments. It's literally a joke, right? So you can get rid of all of them. You can get rid of a ton of pencil pushers, and people are just doing admin jobs and all these kinds of things. So you really can continue to lay off thousands and thousands and thousands. And it's like, but how can they replace them? Well, here's the secret. Half of them you don't have to replace. It's just busy work. So companies are going leaner in terms of their workforce. And then the people that you do need to replace, you can, we had a whole team of lawyers Well, you can replace them with AI. We had a whole team of this. You can replace them. But eventually, here's the point. Eventually, though, if the American worker is replaced and the companies can produce without them, that's possible. But what companies can't do is then turn around and have a market to sell their product to if everyone's unemployed. No one can buy it. Nobody can buy their Amazon packages. So can Amazon keep producing with robots and with ChatGPT and with this and with that? And like, sure, they can. But the biggest, it's if they keep outsourcing H-1B visas and foreign labor that's cheap and supplementing with AI and robots. And so it's anti-American labor and then it's anti-human labor. They can do all those. But here's the fact that still remains, not just for the worker, but think of the buyer. The American market is the most wealthiest market in the world. The American purchaser, buyer, consumer. And if you unemploy Americans at a certain point, there's no one to sell to, and it all comes crashing down. Do I think it's going to happen when the SPY hits 690? Do I think it's going to happen next week? No. Do I think it's going to happen at the end of the year? No. I'll be frank. Again, this is not financial advice. I don't have a crystal ball, but if I had to bet, I think we get a Santa Claus rally to own all Santa Claus rallies. I think to the moon. I think to the moon. I think it's going to be crazy. That said, the chickens will come home to roost because God will not be mocked. A man reaps what he sows, and we are sowing bad seed, and I mean biblically, morally bad seed. We are sowing wickedness. Globalism is wickedness. It is a modern Tower of Babel. We know what God did the first time. God is not on our side. He's not with us as we displace our own countrymen. As we, right before Christmas, say, you know what? We're going to produce great earnings, but 30,000 people won't be able to buy Christmas presents for their kids. Like, God is not going to bless that. So I don't think that it comes crashing down tomorrow. I don't think it comes crashing down this year. I think end of the year Santa Claus rally, honestly, wanting to be innocent as doves, but also shrewd as vipers. You might want to look into buying some stock for the end of the year. But beyond that, moving forward, it could be a month, right? It could be Q1 next year. It could be a year. Could be 2027. It could be 5 years. But I think relatively soon, if we keep this trajectory, you can produce the world. But if you unemploy the world in doing so, there's no one to sell your product to. It's a very basic economic principle, and it will all come crashing down. Bill, do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, you know how I often think about finances a lot the same way I think about salvation. Let me connect the two. A lot of people will say, when you're out there evangelizing and whatnot, people will say, even if they don't say it out loud, the sort of the pushback will be, I'm not ready to change my lifestyle quite yet. And that is, in my experience, that tends to be even more of the issue than no one, very few people at least will say that out loud, but that you can tell they're living a life that they know is not, would not coalesce with what would be expected of them, asked of them from Christ. So they really are not willing to make that transition yet, or accept the Lord, or at least come to belief, because they realize they would have to give up a lot. And I almost look at that in a similar vein to finance and how people treat their finances, in that a lot of times if we know, because as Christians we all understand, we're going to see Christ's going to come back this day of judgment, this day for all of us. So we know that's coming. And we don't know when that is. And we can talk, and people, write books and do all sorts of things, try and guess when that's going to be. But at the end of the day, no man knows. So, and I look at that similarly. If we look at this economy and we know how this ends, we know that at some point, it's a car wreck, economically speaking, then if I'm a month early, if I'm a year early, if I'm several years early, but I'm not in that car wreck, economic system there. If you were not in the market, 2006 rolls around, you said, you know what, this is too much for me. I'm going to sit out. And then 2008 rolls around, and you were 2 years early to the housing market crash. Were you sitting there in 2009 and said, man, I really could have stayed in for another 2 years? I don't think so. I think at least not the people that generally I work with. Same thing with any of these big market drops. I mean, you could look back at '01, the tech bubble, and that was even a similar. I think there's some similarities, not exactly the same, but some similarities there to where we are now. And you can look at that and say, were you? I'm sure in the moment people were, man, I really wish I was in X, Y, and Z. But then when 2001, and the market comes crashing down, and they say, you know what? No, I made a pretty logical decision that it seemed like there was a lot of downside in front of me, and I wanted to protect that and hedge against that. So that was the decision I made. So when I talk to people about this, it's really, to me, and people can make their own decisions, but to me, the conversation is not an if, but a when. And for the people generally that want to protect savings with metals or whatnot, it usually revolves around, I'd rather be a little early than a little late. And that is sort of how I approach this. So, we can, there might be a Santa Claus rally, December could be a great, month in the market. And for someone like myself, who's in metals and has done very, very well in metals, I look at that and I smile and wave, because I turn on the TV, 3 months later, and there's a big market crash, and I also smile and wave. None of my business, doesn't affect me in that same way. So that's, we can analyze and guess and whatnot, but at the end of the day, the chickens come out, as you said, the chickens come home to roost. Correct. At some point, and not my problem. Other people can take those gambles.
No, you're right. The principle remains the same, and the chickens eventually come home to roost. That's the principle. But we will analyze and predict for fun, because it's fun, Bill. We'll do a little bit of that on the side, but the principle is absolutely undefeated. Let's talk gold for a second. I want to tell a personal anecdote. So I have a close friend who has been a incredible supporter of our show. He's like financially, helped us tremendously, kind of picking up the right response team on his back, and carrying us across the finish line. And so he has been a major benefactor for this show. And we've been super grateful. And he reached out to me. This was a few weeks ago. And he has seen us do our first, right? This is our third now, but our first interview with Bill. And so he reached out to me personally. He said, Joel, look, I know you're going to have advertisers, right? I'm not going to give you a hard time about that. I get that. Everybody has advertisers. You got to keep the lights on. He said, but shoot me straight. I've supported your ministry. Is this just an advertiser, or do you actually feel good about this company, Genesis Gold? And I told him, I said, not only do I feel good about them, they're all Christians, but I've talked to multiple individuals, higher up individuals that work with the company, and I will connect you. So yes, to answer the question, yes, I feel good about Genesis Gold, but I'll do you one better than that. I will connect you with one of the higher ups with Genesis Gold directly. You can do a phone call with him and talk to him. And so they did, and I was able to orchestrate that meeting. They talked. He felt so good about it that he ended up moving over, because Genesis Gold is not just, I have to have dry powder and cash on hand, do this, do that. But you guys are able with mitigating, like completely mitigating penalties to transfer over out of an IRA and different, retirement funds, moving to, not that you necessarily can or should do it all, but a portion, if you want to reallocate a portion of your IRA and different, retirement funds, and say, you know what, I'd like to not just be in the S&P 500, or certain mutual funds or bonds, but I want to have at least some precious metals, because the concept, the principle of gold, literal gold, is all throughout the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. It's a part of God's timeless economy. And so I'm going to hedge some of my bets with God's currency, God's currency. And I don't think that's hyperbole. I'm going to use the biblical currency and the American currency until we stop being American. So I'm going to do a little bit of that. And so this guy, great guy who supports this ministry, he did that phone call. I set him up. I said, yes, I feel good about Genesis Gold. He got to talk to one of the higher ups, and he was able to answer all those questions, and he transferred over $500,000 over to Genesis Gold. And then gold went on a tear. I mean, just to the moon. Reached all-time highs. What was it, Bill? It was at least 4,000. Did it kiss above 4,000 with gold recently in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah. A little, just for people who've been watching or wondering. So we had even a run up into gold, touched 4,200. This is
42.
Sitting right now at 4,000
Good grief.
is the little pullback here when people are taking profit before, which, and this is a longer conversation, but is really a positive thing from a technical standpoint.
You have to, right? It's
consolidation.
You got to compress, right? You scream up, then there's distribution, some profit taking, you compress for a next leg up. And so, no, I do not view the 42. Yeah, I don't view the 42 down to 4,000 as like, oh, the sky is falling, it's crashing, sell, sell, sell. That is normal in any market, and especially with gold and precious metals. So I'm with you, Bill. I view that as like bursting through all-time highs, kissing 4,200, coming back to an equilibrium, a new equilibrium, a new base, kind of carving it like, here's our platform now, this is the new base, and getting ready for another leg up, which could be an end of the year going with the stock market, because that's possible. It doesn't always have to diverge and go opposite. So it could go with the stock market, but it also very much could, if the stock market rallies, Santa rally at the end of the year, which I'm predicting, no crystal ball, not financial advice, but I think that's going to happen. Well, if we get a Santa Claus rally, I can guarantee you what we got in 2020, after the end of the year market rally, what we got 2021, what we got 2024, right? That's when Fed Powell, I believe it was December 18th. I remember it well. He came out, good afternoon, and everything started falling. And so we got it 2020, 2021, 2024. And I do not think that 2025 will be an exception to the rule. I think we'll get the rally, but then it will come back down because it'll be a blow off top. Talking about the market, not gold, but the market. And so I think gold will follow the market into November, December, or at minimum, gold will hang out around 4,000, get back to 4,200, maybe even carve out a little bit of an all-time high again. But then when the market cools off after a Santa Claus rally and pulls way back, then gold, that might be gold signal to then begin to take off as people are redistributing out of the market into precious metals. So personally, I don't see any ceiling for gold. Not just, of course, 50 years from now, there's no ceiling for gold. We know that. We know that's how precious metals work. But what I'm saying is, I think bigger than that. I'm not just saying, hey, gold could go super, super high by the time you're 90 years old. No, I'm saying I think gold could rocket in the next 6 to 12 months. Honestly, in the next 3 to 6 months, but especially 6 to 12 months. Bill, do you feel like that's fair? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So one statistic I always love to point to is just where gold is at, historically compared to adjusted for inflation and whatnot. And because people often look at, they say, is this the same as the 80s when gold, was just going through the roof? And I say gold is still, relative to inflation, is still much lower than it was in the 80s. So even though obviously it's higher, adjusted for inflation and whatnot, it's actually lower than it was even at those peaks. Now, because the gold obviously gets squeezed here when we've got uncertainty across the world, and people look at what we've got now and say, well, there must be a lot of uncertainty, and there is some of that. But at the same time, there is this overwhelming, it's going to be fine mentality that persists, I think, through, and inevitably, as I kind of was mentioning earlier, that will be a tremendous downfall because reactions will be much later than they probably should be. And some of that is just because it's all algorithmically traded at this point. So when major economic news occurs, it's really being filtered by how a computer takes that rather than human. There's some merit to that, but there's also at some point a computer that is tracking data and it says, okay, well, something like or these major recessions, it's looking at the grand scale, but we had tremendous years, 60s, 70s, 50s, where, for a huge chunk, none of these issues are really things we ever worried about today. So I will say one of the flaws in any sort of algorithmic trading that persists as most of, paper, gold and silver and paper stocks and whatnot, is that it doesn't have the scope to understand really that some of this is cyclical. I mean, Rome doesn't exist today, or at least not in the sense of, as a superpower here. We're not using the denarii. And so while a computer may look at these in short sample sizes and say, well, it always kind of works itself out, the genuine answer here is that through human history, it doesn't really always work itself out. And at some point, the cards are on the table and it does see these big crashes. And that's why I talk about whether it's today, whether it's tomorrow, a month from now, a year from now, it doesn't really matter. So all of that to say, we'll see. It's just a matter of time.
So do us a favor here at the end of this segment, and then I want to make sure that we have time for super chats real quick, and then I'll pose a question before our final commercial break. But real quick, some points of order. Please, if you're following us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and click the bell. Right Response Ministries on YouTube, subscribe and click the bell. On X, if you're not already following us on X, go give us a follow. The handle is @RightResponseM, as in ministries, @RightResponseM. Make sure to follow us. And also there is a bell on X to make sure that you are notified when we're posting on X, not just our videos, we live stream on X. But in addition to that, it's just a happy coincidence, happy blessing for you is not only will you get our live streams on Monday and Wednesday and Friday, but if you click the bell on X, you will get every random thought that pops into my head that I decide to tweet out at 3 a.m. What a gift, right? I mean, what a blessing. Every opinion that I personally hold could be yours for free by literally just following Right Response M. And clicking the bell over on X. So make sure to do that. And if you're wondering what our schedule is, if you're new here, the schedule is 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 3 p.m. Central Time. And that is it's live. We'll do it live. It's a live stream Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 3 p.m. Central Time. And we simultaneously broadcast that live on both YouTube and X. So make sure you do that. And then what I'm going to ask from Bill, I just did the points of order, the plug for us. I want him to do it for him. Anybody who heard all the things that we've been talking about, especially in the second segment, and is interested in having a conversation like I was able to set up for one of our major donors with Genesis Gold. If anybody's interested and they want to be able to talk to a rep from Genesis Gold about what it would look like with their retirement funds or reallocating and hedging some of their portfolio in precious metals, where would they go, Bill?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we've got a link there in the description of the video here that people can click and they just plug that right in. You can put in your information. We're happy to reach out, send you whatever you're looking for. Another way, you can call 1-800-200-GOLD. You can ask to speak to me directly. If you don't like talking to redheads, that's fine. There's other people you can talk to. But across the board, really at the end of the day, and I can speak to the client that Joel was referencing there. We're here to help people. I mean, this is sort of the vocation that I've put together. I've worked in and around ministry in the past, and now obviously I'm in a finance focused role. But I see them in a similar vein in that the example that was always given to me. Everything we're given is a blessing from God, and so my job then is to make sure that as God's blessing pours down, I'm just keeping the gutters clean so that can be redistributed to wherever the Lord has that. So if that's something, if you're looking at the general state of the world and you're saying, I would rather be a little early, I'd rather be protected now rather than later, I'd rather get into something tangible, you're so welcome and invited to give us a call and speak through if this is something that makes sense for you. Again, there's a URL there, and I'm sure we'll mention that. And then 1-800-200-GOLD. Mention you came, of course, from Right Response, just so we can know where you're coming from and have an idea. But would love to talk to anyone that would like information or help on this.
Great. So there's a link in the description under the video. You can use that, or 1-800-200-GOLD, and let them know that Right Response sent you, but also ask to speak to Bill. He's great. He's a solid believer. Didn't you do your undergrad in biblical studies?
I did, yes.
Right, Bill?
Biblical studies, and Christian ministry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Bill's a great guy. We appreciate him. Asked to talk to Bill. Okay, we're going to go to our final commercial break. Real quick before we do, if there's a comment or a question and you want it to be read live on the air, our kind of policy is this. If you send us a super chat, then in honoring your generosity, we will make the time to get to your comment/question. So if you give a super chat, that's going to be read live on the air, and we will give you an answer. For everybody else who puts questions in the chat, if we have time after the super chats, then we try to get to those. But often, especially these days, there's just more activity, more comments, more questions in the chat than ever before. Praise God. So these days, it's pretty much just the super chats. So we're going to go to our final commercial break. We're going to come back. We're going to deal with the super chats. If there's a burning question or a comment that you want to be read and addressed live on the air, then send us a super chat during this final commercial break, and we'll get to it as soon as we come back. When we think about what powers our modern world, fighter jets, clean energy, even the phone that's in your hand, we rarely stop to ask the question, what powers our power? See, it all comes down to a handful of critical minerals, and most of these minerals come from overseas. Now that is a problem. Saga Metals is working to fix this problem. Their mission? Build a secure, independent future for North America by developing domestic sources of titanium, lithium, and uranium, the materials that our economy and defense depend on. Their flagship project in Labrador, Canada spans 160 square kilometers with a 15,000 meter drill program underway, driving a potentially world-class titanium resource. Saga has also partnered with global mining leader Rio Tinto, which can invest up to $44 million in Saga's lithium project, a major vote of confidence. Now, Saga Metals trades publicly under SAGMF in the US and SAGA, that's Saga, in Canada. With the race to secure supply chains heating up, a company with assets like these won't stay under the radar for very long. So learn more at sagametals.com. Again, that's sagametals.com. Hey friends, Gray Toad Tallow is a family business making skin care the way that it should be, simple and clean. The company began as a personal mission to find healthier, more affordable solutions to common skin problems without the chemicals that are found in most products today. Now that search led to crafting balms from grass-fed, grass-finished animals that were naturally rich in vitamins and healthy fats, which is exactly what your skin craves. These balms fight dryness, they calm eczema and psoriasis, along with other stubborn skin issues, without containing all the nasty toxins. Gray Toad Tallow offers everyday soaps, balms, and beard balm for men. To experience some of their products, grab a balm sample pack. Each batch is made with care in their home and shipped directly to their customers. For skincare, the way that God designed, natural, clean, and effective, visit graytoadtallow.com. Use code RIGHT15 for 15% off your order today. Again, that's graytoadtallow.com. And if you want 15% off, then add the promo code RIGHT15 today. All right, we're back. Our first super chat is from Dapper Dan. He gave us $20. Thank you, Dapper Dan. We appreciate it. He said, on my last comment in the chat, what I was getting at was how today's average conservative woman thinks that any man not able to offer her infinite comfort must be a lib. It's covert feminism and materialism. All right, so I think I know what Dapper Dan is getting at, and I'll respond by saying this. If you were with us in our last stream, right, we do Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So our last stream was on Wednesday. What we did, we focused on the topic of Tucker Carlson interviewing Nick Fuentes. We were responding to that. And just for the record, much to many people's chagrin, they cannot believe it, and they cope and seethe and screech into the void. I like Nick Fuentes. I think he has a lot of good things to say. I don't agree with everything, but I like him. And one of the best parts of the interview, in my assessment, Tucker did a great job. I like Tucker as well. I'm not going to cancel Tucker. I believe in free speech. That's not true. I don't believe in absolute free speech. Pornography is not speech. It should absolutely be banned. But I believe in free speech that is actual speech, and especially when it's right wing and when it aligns with the Word of God. So Tucker did no wrong in hosting Nick. I thought he did a great job. But I also think Nick did a good job. And the most interesting part of the interview heard around the world, in my assessment, was towards the second half of the interview, where Tucker was talking about, well, young men, Nick, he's 27 years old, he's single. Young men, they need to get married, right? They need to man up. Spoken as a true 56-year-old man who is insightful and wise and has done a lot of good. Again, super grateful for Tucker Carlson, but also in this instance, completely out of touch. Completely out of touch. And Nick responded well by saying, look, here's the deal. the entire judicial system is against men, right? You get married, your wife can divorce you, no fault divorce. It could be one-sided in many states. You don't even have to agree with it. And the judge, the court system will side with her. You will lose your kids. You will lose your house. You will lose this. You will lose that. And so we were commenting on that on Wednesday as we did our kind of response video to the Tucker Nick interview. And we said, I said that it's likened to Pharaoh, who says to the Israelites, bricks, but no straw. And that's kind of where we're at as a society when it comes to men and women. When it comes to men and women, we will still kind of echo the patriarchal sentiments of like the man needs to provide, he needs to protect, and I'm talking about conservatives right now. I'm not talking about progressives. I'm not talking about gay furries. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, Big Con, right? Big Con Inc., conservatives. The conservatives will say, well, one of the things that makes us conservative is that we're patriarchal, or at least, patriarchal-ish. We recognize that men are different than women, and men are called to provide. They're called to protect. They're called to do all these kinds of things. But there's not really an acknowledgement that men still bear, under God, this is true, responsibility, but they have been robbed of every ounce of authority, right? And I use the example of a police officer. Serve and protect. There's the duty, the responsibility. Badge and a gun. There's the corresponding rights and authority to carry out the responsibility. Men today are expected by conservatives to bear the same weight of responsibility, protect and provide, but with very little, if any, of the corresponding authority in order to carry out that responsibility. It is the conservative movement today, by and large, is demanding from young men bricks without straw. And I think that's what Dapper Dan is getting to. And he's saying that conservatives, in many ways, they're also, even for young conservative women, they're setting them up for disappointment by telling them that they can expect a man to provide for them and to provide infinite comfort, to provide at a very high level, but to do so how? In an economy that has garnered massively male wages by foreigners and, here's the irony, hiring women. Because we live in a feminist economy, men make half in terms of actual purchasing power, half, and that's generous, the wages that they used to make even just a few decades ago, because we've said, you go get them, sweetheart, put on the pantsuit, boss babe, get in the ring, show your worth. And then now, Big Con, conservative groups are doing rallies and conferences with women in pantsuits, telling other women, we're conservative, we're patriarchal. And so what does that mean? That a man has authority and you should submit to him? Well, no, it never means that. What it means, that women are going to be held accountable for their own shortcomings and failures? No, it never means that. It means we're conservative and patriarchal, that men still have every ounce of responsibility that the Bible says so. They must protect and they must provide. And provision means they need to be rich. And that's what you can demand as a woman when you're looking for a husband. That's what you should expect. And when he says that, well, he can't be rich because there's literally no jobs that actually give a fair wage, well, he's just making excuses and he needs to man up. That was a rare Tucker L. I mean, he kind of, whether you're Tucker Carlson or Ali Bestucky, our powers united, both, closeted feminists. And that's my opinion. Tell us how you really feel. That's how I really feel. Nick, I think, did a good job in standing up to that respectfully. He wasn't rude, but saying, okay, boomer, no, that is not correct. So I think that's what Dapper Dan was getting at. And I would say, Dapper Dan, you are absolutely right. Some of these are going to be for Bill, and some of them maybe won't specify, but we'll turn it to you, Bill. But that one had nothing to do with the episode today, so I went ahead and took that one. Wes, you want to go ahead and read the next?
All right. This dude rocks. Long-time supporter, great guy, $10. He said this, congrats on your recent shout out. That was on Nick's show last night. He said everyone should go check out Joel, follow him, doing great work. Really appreciate that. He asked, what would you say the differences between Nick Fuentes and Corey Mahler are? They seem similar to me, although Fuentes is definitely funnier.
Yep, that is a great question, because I'm going to answer that one too, because a lot of people say, well, wait a second. you've mentioned, Joel, that you would be willing to do something with Nick, but you haven't said that about Corey. I have, in recent episodes, because of the super chats at the end and wanting to honor them, if you send us a super chat, we're going to answer. And so I actually have given a little bit more specification in regards to Stone Choir and Corey Mahler. And specification in the vein of saying, I believe that he's a brother in Christ. I refuse to call him a heretic until I see some heresy. I need some heresy if I'm going to say something like that. But he does hold views that I think are wrong. Okay? But views that I think are wrong are not necessarily heresy. I think that continuationists are wrong, but that's not heresy, right? So there's, we have to be able to do theological triage, and we have to not lose our minds and be emotional and dramatic. Corey upsets lots of people because he talks about race, and race is very much a taboo subject. But what is the difference? Why have I been? So number one, I'm not anathematizing Corey Mahler, although I do think that some views are problematic, a serious problem. But if you're kind of picking up, it sounds like the super chat is picking up. Joel, it seems as though there's like more openness to a Nick Fuentes than a Corey Mahler. What's going on with that? This is what I would say. Theologically, in terms of soteriology, these kinds of things, there's going to be more overlap with us, with Corey Mahler, than there is with Nick. Corey Mahler is a Lutheran. Corey Mahler is Protestant. Nick is Catholic. So I have much deeper disagreements theologically in that regard, soteriology, ecclesiology, these kinds of things, much deeper disagreements with Nick than I would with Corey. But here's the deal. I'm not really interested in either of those subjects, soteriology or ecclesiology, in regards to any potential collaboration with a Nick or Corey, right? Like I'm not going to have Corey Mahler come on the show to talk ecclesiology, or, hey, you know what? Let's talk about salvation, right? That's just, we have those conversations. There's other guys that would get to have those conversations. So if you're talking about, Corey or Nick in the realm of, let's just be honest, it would be in the realm of Israel or race or, politics, culture in a broader sense. It's not going to be, theology of soteriology. That's just not what it's going to be. So in that realm, right? So now the Catholic thing kind of goes to the wayside. If we're talking politics and culture and not theology, right? We're talking race or our America's, partnership with Israel, those kinds of things, right? Not soteriology. If we're talking about that, there actually are objective, definitive distinctions between a Nick Fuentes and a Corey Mahler. Nick actually has a softer view. Nick says things in a certain way that can be highly offensive. The guy shot up into the stratosphere at 17 years old in his parents' basement. He's not in their basement anymore, but there was a time. Shot up into the stratosphere as a single 17-year-old young man. Everyone hated him, couldn't get on an airplane, lost his bank accounts, was deplatformed from every social media platform there is. And so he leaned in and played the heel, right? There was kind of like a Joker moment, right? Some men just want to watch the world burn. He leaned into that. He played into it hard. And he's admitted that. And I've talked to him about that. And there's still some of that. Some of that is his brand. Some of it's his style. And some of it comes actually from convictions that I personally disagree with, but he actually has a rhyme and reason. It's not just arbitrary. It's not just ridiculous. He actually is like, no, Joel, there's a strategy here. Trust the plan, that kind of thing. And we can agree to disagree. But a lot of the hardest moments, right? The best hits, which the most notorious hits from Nick Fuentes back in the day. I think some of those things have changed as he's gotten older, as he's matured. That's the rhetoric. But in terms of the actual positions, Nick Fuentes does not believe. So I'm being real honest. You asked the question, I'm giving you an answer. Nick Fuentes does not believe that Clarence Thomas has to go back to Africa. Corey Mahler does. Right? You're asking me, well, what's the difference? Why Nick Fuentes? Look, some of you are, I just got to be honest, you are behaving as hysterical women. Tucker Carlson hosted Nick Fuentes and you lost your mind. But if you can pull back the hysteria for a moment, right? Grab a seat, drink a glass of water, breathe into a paper bag a few times if you need to. And I'm talking sadly to men right now, but if you men can stop being hysterical for just a moment and view it objectively, right? Take all the clips from Nick Fuentes answering his super chats where he's being bombastic. Take that aside and just look at the positions. Look at the positions. Nick's position is that Black people should stop committing crimes and be upstanding citizens. And if they don't, then they should be in prison. And white people also, for that matter. Corey Muller's position is that every Black person in America can never be an American. They all need to be loaded up on planes or ships and taken back. So I'm just saying, right, regardless of your opinion, right, you might agree with one or the other. I'm just saying I have more in common with Nick. Okay, if you're wondering where are you at on this, Joel? I believe that a heritage American is somebody who on both sides of the family is third generation American, or on one side of the family is fifth generation American. I do believe that assimilation is possible. Often it doesn't happen because it's not even attempted. There are many people who have come to our nation since Hart-Celler Act over the last 50, 60 years who have no intent whatsoever to assimilate, to be American in any stripe or form or fashion whatsoever. That's got to stop. And millions do actually need to go back. But if we're talking about people who can track back their ancestry in this country, on this land, for 400 years and are not being criminal, regardless of the statistics and their overall demographic, they are some of the exceptions. They are upstanding citizens. They are working a job. They are paying taxes. They are Christian, and they can track back their ancestry 400 years like a Clarence Thomas type. I'm going to say that he is an American. He does not have to go back. And I, for one, will go on record and say, God bless him. And I'm grateful for him. I'm grateful for Clarence Thomas. Nick would say the same. I would say the same. Corey Muller would compare him to pigs and has done so on Twitter. So there's an objective difference in our position. Again, not anathematizing, not saying, and therefore Corey Muller is going to hell. No, I understand that rhetoric offends people, but it is not a theological argument. You have to actually give me an argument from the scripture that merits heresy. Okay? So I think Corey's wrong. I'm not at the point where I would call him a heretic. But on the positions of culture, not soteriology, not ecclesiology, culture and politics, particularly in the vein of race, which is a very, very, very spicy, sensitive issue right now, I would have actually much more in common. Not so much the style or the rhetoric of a Nick, but the actual positions of Nick, I think, are tenable. And I will say it publicly. And people can blast me all they want. But I think that Nick's actual positions, not always his wording, but his positions on Israel, on Jews, on race, on politics, I think those positions, because he was self-controlled, he did a great job, not the rhetoric, but the positions actually manifested themselves on Monday with Tucker Carlson. And I think that's precisely why all the neocons are freaking out right now. Do you know why they're freaking out? Because Nick is just so terrible and so dangerous. No, it's because he was disciplined, he was strategic, he was well-spoken, and the reason why the neocons are losing their minds is because they know that his positions are actually quite moderate and compelling. And they know that, not that Nick is unhinged and ridiculous, right? Because you're not worried about unhinged and ridiculous people. They're worried because they're starting to realize, he's actually quite reasonable. He's actually quite persuasive, and he's probably going to win. Buckley is actually, in the final analysis, going to lose. Buchanan is actually going to finally get his turn. And this young Mexican, Irish, Italian man who started his career in his mom's basement and was blacklisted from everything. Cancel culture is now ended. He's getting his 5 minutes of fame, and he's kind of nailing it. Oh, snap. Oh, snap. So that's my answer to the question. Long answer, per usual. But this dude Rock said, what's the difference between Corey Muller and Nick Fuentes? There's actually, I think, a stark difference. Theologically, Protestant Catholic. But in terms of culture and politics, Corey Muller is actually much further than Nick Fuentes, right? both of them realize, okay, race is real. And here's some of the things that, that we should be aware of and we should acknowledge. But then in terms of solutions, Corey's solution is no non-white person can be here or ever attain citizenship or even be here. Nick does not hold that position. And that difference to me matters immensely. Call me a lib, but I'm going to side with Nick. I think it's the more reasonable position and Christ-honoring position that contains realism. It's honest. It's courageous. It's not just lying and pretending that everybody's the same, but it also encompasses compassion. I think it's the winning position. I think it's the right position. Okay, next question. Hopefully something for Bill.
I'll give this one to you, Bill. This dude Rock sent another $10. If you could restructure the United States of America's setup with regards to the state sovereignty in relation to the federal, so state sovereignty versus federal sovereignty, what would you do? Or would you rearrange it to something else like many secessions? What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, absolutely. I think taking power away from the federal government in general is always preferable. I think that it's not even reasonable that we have so much federal power when you talk about how big the United States is. I mean, frankly, I don't want the policy from California and all the people they have influencing, middle America or other places in the world. That if they want to go be insane and be crazy, that's fine. They can do that. But it shouldn't. We should be able to be separate from that if we want. We should be able to be in places here where we can be sheltered from that more than exists now. And I mean, again, we talk about larger, just federal, like EBT and whatnot. I want to be in a state here or be able to be in a state where we can more control what, my tax dollars do. I mean, I'd love to be able to choose where my tax dollars go. If I have to pay taxes, I would love to be able to say, these are things that I'm okay paying taxes into. I'll pay the same amount of taxes, but I want them going to, X, Y, and Z, not going to, crazy, transgender reassignment, all sorts of things. Right. So yeah, absolutely. I would say the general restructuring, I mean, obviously, we can remain, one nation, but I would say a dramatic restructuring of power away from the federal government and into state level. That would be probably my short answer there.
Great
Robert
answer.
E. Lee, I was going to say, he warned exactly about that. He said, if the North is successful in their war of aggression, then they will become tyrannical at home and despotic abroad. They were all seeing, hey, if the federal government grows and grows and grows and grows and can demand these things of states, they're going to be tyrannical. They're going to take your money to give it to people that won't work to eat. Oh.
Yep. Here we are. Okay, King Jerd, he asked, how many rounds should I carry when I go grocery shopping tomorrow? All right, first thing you got to consider is where are you grocery shopping? If you're going to Costco or Walmart or Aldi's, and personally, I'll be honest, I like all three. But if you're going to those three contexts, I'm a 30-round kind of guy, right? You've got one, it's already in the gun, then you got two more on the side, each one 10 rounds. So I would say, honor the Lord, 30 pieces of silver, with you ready to fire off if needed. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But in all seriousness, you are called to provide and protect. And there's really, there's few times that you get to do both at the same time. Provision with the groceries, protection with the 30 rounds. Tomorrow could be your big day. Also, here's another thing. Maybe don't go grocery shopping tomorrow. You know what I mean? Yeah. Maybe, it would have been great to go grocery shopping this past week in preparation and then hold off a little while. But in all seriousness, I would carry. Do not let your wife and children go alone for the next little while until things get ironed out. And I also would pick certain times of the day. I would not be going, like on a Friday night or something like that. I would be wise and maybe try to hold off. Just exercise discernment, exercise wisdom. Okay, Wes, next one.
All right, cool dude sent $5. He said, Groiper, but I hardly know her.
Well, that's actually kind of funny.
It is.
All right.
Micah Bloomquist just sent a question in very briefly. Did you see Nick Fuentes shouted you out and highly recommended your content? This would have been on last night's show.
Yeah, last night's show. I don't know if it was possible for me not to see it because I woke up today, with a ton of people hopping on and following me on both Twitter and on YouTube, and also a bunch of friends, sending me sending me, clips, the clip from his show. So yes, I did see that, and I've already said it publicly, and I think Nick has said as much. We have had conversations over this past year. And a lot of people, are going to hate me for it, but here's the deal. They're going to hate me, and I'm not going to be able to win them over. You can't win them all. I remember an older pastor once told me years ago, he said, Joel, you always have to disappoint someone. But in God's grace, you get to choose who. You always have to disappoint someone. So the idea of, well, I'm not going to disappoint anyone. That's just not reality. So you always have to disappoint someone, but you get to choose who. And what I've determined for years now is that there's a short list of people that I, by God's grace, refuse to disappoint. I'm not going to disappoint my wife. I'm not going to disappoint my children. I'm not going to disappoint my local church and the members there. So there's people that I'm not going to disappoint. But then there's a lot of other people where, you gotta choose. I can either disappoint a bunch of people who've come to know and love our content over the last 6 months, and turn out to just to be a lib and a mush and a Buckley. And I can disappoint all of you guys, or I can disappoint a bunch of other people who are hoping that I would follow in the footsteps of, some boomer pastor and, continue to say, there's only one race, the human race, and we're colorblind. So I got to disappoint one of those groups. I have chosen, and I think I've made that abundantly clear over the last year or so, maybe even longer, that I'm going to disappoint that latter group. I'm going to disappoint the neocon, Buckleyite kind of, there's no such thing as race. We're all colorblind. We should be. I'm going to disappoint that group. So all that being said, I kind of made a conscious decision a while back. And so in light of that, I kind of was a little bit of an early adopter. Very early this year, I believe it was February. I don't have a lot of gifts, right? I'm a pretty unremarkable man in most ways. But one thing that I feel like the Lord has given me is the ability to see things before they happen. That's why I kind of like predictions and those kinds of things. I can be wrong. I'm fallible, just like everybody else. But I remember it was February, and I just realized, oh, I get it now. I didn't get it. I didn't understand. I had heard the name like most people, Nick Fuentes, and heard the rumors, and didn't really have an opinion one way or the other because I never really looked into anything. But it shifted from just here's a voice, here's a personality to wait, I think something's about to change. And I told Wes and others, and Wes agreed. Wes was one of the guys who kind of turned me on to looking in this direction. But a bunch of guys who are close and friends, and some of the guys at our church, we basically just realized like it or not, this man is going to make a generational comeback. And people can't see it yet, but it's going to happen. He's going to be mainstreamed. He's going to break out of containment, because we could just see the way that the culture was going. Cancel culture was dying. And we realized, okay, it's just not logical to think that Tucker is going to, just launch into the stratosphere, and Candace Owens and this person and that person, and the sentiment of Americans, especially young Americans, towards Israel, like by the day, Israel going lower and lower in the polls, and then to think that Nick Fuentes wouldn't get any of that momentum when he's been banging that drum for a decade. And so we just kind of saw the writing on the wall, and everybody sees it now, so everybody's hitting him up. Hey, will you come on my show? Or, this or that or the other. But the reason I was able to kind of build some relationship with Nick was because it was before he went on Tucker, before he went on PPD, before he went on Candace, before he went on Elijah Schaefer, before he went on Hodge Twins, before, any of that. February of this year, we saw it before it was. We saw it before it was. Everybody can see it now, but we saw it, and so I reached out and just wanted to let him know that I was praying for him, and that although I disagreed with some things, that I thought he was doing a lot of good, and encouraged him, and so kind of went that direction, and I think it's safe to say, without trying to be self-serving or arrogant, we were right. So that's my response.
Good answer. $5 from C Runner 1277 sent 2 super chats actually. A judge named Talwani just issued a ruling that the Fed Gov must use contingency funds for the SNAP program. The contingency funds are funds that are left over from the previous year that can be used for the administration of it. The problem is they don't actually cover the full amount, so it's not really clear here. I mean, it's 5 p.m. on Friday. Benefits expire tomorrow. It's not really clear here how that'll actually be used, how the administration could even do it. But a woman named Talwani said it has to happen, so I guess it has to happen.
What do you think about that, Bill?
I didn't quite hear the question. I apologize.
It wasn't a question. It was a comment. They said a judge named Talwani just issued a ruling that the federal government must use contingency funds for SNAP program. What do you think the outcome of that will be? Any thoughts?
I mean, I think it's just more of the same, judicial overreach. I think this is, kind of the tried and true method at this point. I hope nothing comes of it. I mean, I hope this gets fought, but at some point, and I think we talked about this earlier, is this idea that at some point, Trump needs to have that moment where enough is enough, and we're not, right. Constantly, allowing these things to occur. At some point, you say, no, that's just not going to happen. Otherwise, and I was even thinking about this in regards to even some of the way the tariffs have gone, in that there has been a lot of capitulation. I get it. Trump's a deal maker. I fully understand that. But if people, even if it's purely in their heads, believe that they will win or gain traction by holding out. I mean, even the fact that we're having this shutdown right now, in some ways, if every Democrat understood for a fact that Trump was never going to cave, there would be no point for a holdout. It would be a pointless endeavor entirely. But I think there is at least some understanding among some people that they can, hold out longer than Trump in this way, or at least, in the sphere of public opinion. And so I would say, at some point you have to do away with that for the greater good. So, I mean, what ends up happening, anyone's guess. I would hope that is not the case, because these are the necessary results of the situation we're in. And if we're not ready to pay those costs, so to speak, then we should have folded this hand a while ago. Otherwise, right. you play a hand to the end.
Well said. All right. This is from This Dude Rocks. He gave us $5 and he said, is there a steel man for the Orthodox view of infused righteousness? That's also the Roman Catholic view, that righteousness is infused rather than imputed, right? So a steel man for the Orthodox or Catholic view of infused righteousness, I'm trying to understand, he says, seems not so different from imputed righteousness, which is the Protestant view. I would say that the steel man is the traditional Reformed Protestant view. I'm thinking of Lutherans, I'm thinking of Anglicans, and to a certain extent, I'm also thinking of the Presbyterian tradition. And so what I mean by that is that if you're looking at the classic traditional Reformed Protestant view, I understand that Lutherans are not Reformed in the technical sense, but older classical Protestant views, I think that is the steel man. And what I mean is that they hold the line definitively of imputed righteousness. However, when they look to the sacraments, they absolutely affirm that the sacraments are means of grace, right? That they actually do transfer grace. So when you're looking at the classical Protestant view, you believe that Christ, who is always present with believers, even if you're on a deserted island all by yourself, and especially present when 2 or 3 believers gather in his name, that's what he says in Matthew 18, that this Christ who is always present with individual believers, especially present with 2 or 3 believers when they gather in his name, is even more, all the more present in the supper. And Protestants, again, the classical Protestant position believes this. The Lutheran position is that Christ is with and over and under, beside his presence, spiritual presence, not physical, but there is a unique, special, heightened spiritual presence of the risen Lord that accompanies the sacrament of the Lord's Supper, and to varying degrees also baptism, and even beyond that within the classic Protestant tradition that would be attached not quite as explicitly, but still implicitly to things outside of the sacraments, like the ordinary means of grace still being conferred with preaching, or with worshiping the Lord through song, or prayer, or other things besides just baptism and the Lord's Supper. So I personally, obviously I'm biased as a Protestant, but I would say that the steel man of the view that sacraments that grace is infused through sacraments, that's the implicit part. Infused how? Through what? Sacraments. That's the Catholic position. That's the Eastern Orthodox position. I would say that the steel man is the Protestant position, which is that grace is not infused through sacraments, but rather it is imputed through faith. Imputed through faith, but that the sacraments are still means of grace. And so grace is transferred. A measure of grace is imparted. There is a measure of grace that is imparted, a heightened, special, powerful, potent, spiritual presence of the risen Lord Jesus with the supper, with baptism, to some degree, with the preached word, with the word as it's preached, as it's sung in spiritual songs and hymns and psalms. And that is the Protestant position, is that the Protestant position we affirm means of grace. And we do not believe that faith is the only means of grace. So we believe that faith is the exclusive empty hand that lays hold of grace in a salvific way. That faith is the exclusive instrument that receives grace in a salvific way, emphasis on salvific way. But we do believe that grace is transferred through means of grace, and that is significant, and that does matter. So transferred grace through the ordinary means of grace. The classic Protestant position affirms, but we would not call it infused in any salvific way, like baptismal regeneration that actually saves an infant at the moment of baptism, but then as they age and commit certain mortal sins, they then fall from a state of grace and then have to be reinstated through confirmation and other sacraments along the life of the believer. That is not the Protestant view. That said, it would be the steel man would be that the classic Protestant view, although we don't believe that an infant is actually brought up from death to life into a state of grace at the moment of paedobaptism. We do believe that baptism does transfer, not infuse, but transfer a special sense of grace because of a unique Christ who is always present with all believers, is uniquely or especially present, spiritually present in the ordinary means of grace. And that every believer, Protestant believers, we've lost this. Protestants have gone too far. We've lost this sense that I need the regular, and I would argue weekly, partaking of the Lord's Supper, and the regular weekly sitting underneath the preached word, and the regular weekly singing corporately psalms and hymns and spiritual songs and prayer. I need those ordinary means of grace on a regular weekly basis to spur me on to love and good works, to help preserve me in my salvation. But ultimately, the salvific grace, the initial salvific grace of salvation, conversion, justification itself, we do believe is imputed, not infused, through faith as the instrument that lays hold of it. That's how I would answer it. Wes, what do you think?
He says it doesn't seem so different. It's a metaphysical distinction. So think of infusion of grace as continuous. So you can have more grace, less grace. That's why the Catholic emphasis on, for example, the seven sacraments. You have all these different means of grace that infuse it. And as Aquinas would write, they help to elevate man above his natural concupiscence. Mm-hmm. Protestants think categorical. So you have continuous with infused. I need grace infused to elevate me higher and higher and higher, basically, to be more like God.
Keep you afloat.
Yes.
It's like you start to sing, float.
And that comes from Aristotle, the chain of being.
Yeah.
Protestants say, no, it's categorical and covenantal, your righteousness. So that would be the distinction between the two. That's real and substantive.
Well said. Okay, this next one is from CNRB, Christian Nationalist, Reformed Baptist, 1689. He says, do you have any suspicion with Erica Kirk? Well, as a policy, when it comes to my public rhetoric, I'm going to be exceedingly charitable and respectful and kind towards a widow, a Christian widow. That said, yes, I have some suspicions. Okay, next.
Well, Mitch Massey sent 2 super chats. The first one, $40. Thank you, Mitch. Very generous. Philippians 1:14. I'm sure the great man is coming. This ministry helped push the Overton window to prep the way. Thanks, men.
That's
Thanks
right.
for being courageous again and again. Thank you for the encouragement and thank you for the support. Mitch Massey sent a $100 super chat.
Whoa.
Right after, and this one with a question. Why no Christmas tree in your church? What is the conviction I can adopt? I like that. He's taking his thinking and he's saying, I need a position on this. Yep. Could you just go ahead and fill yours in for me?
Yep. So I think we said this on Wednesday. I actually would do a Christmas tree in the foyer, right? Or a classroom or something like that. The entrance, I would not have a Christmas tree in the sanctuary. I also would not have an American flag in the sanctuary. I would not have an Israeli flag within a 10-mile radius of the building. So I think that there are things that are good that Christians should affirm, respect, esteem. But the concept, the principle is worship. And part of this is the Protestant ethos. That worship is, we can have high church. I think Protestants have lost that. And even our local church is trying to get back to that. Wes, you'll be happy to hear that I made some tweaks to the liturgy for this Sunday that we have talked about. And so we want to have a sense of reverence and a high church sense of liturgy. But at the same time, you can have high church in terms of your liturgy, your order of worship, the way that you worship, and yet there is within the Protestant tradition still at the same time a divine simplicity. And that might be confusing because it makes me, it sounds like I'm talking about theology proper, like God without parts. But what I mean is a holy simplicity to our worship. The Protestant can worship with a cathedral, and if he can, I think he should. But if he can't have a cathedral for whatever reason, the Protestant can technically worship rightly, right worship in spirit and in truth, in a field with water, bread, wine, and 2 or 3 Holy Spirit indwelt believers.
Right.
And we can do church, and it can be high. It can include a sense of fear and trembling and majesty. It can be liturgical, but also at the same time simple. So when it comes to the elements of worship, is theologically the phrase, the elements of worship. We believe that the elements of worship is bread, wine, water, Bible, Scripture, and then the people of God. And so I don't really want anything in our worship that distracts from that. I don't want images in our worship. If we want to have in the foyer or in my home, right? Perfectly fine with this at a personal level, my home. If we want to have nice, tasteful paintings of certain saints, I think that's great. If we want to have a Christmas tree in celebration of the birth of our Savior, I think that's great. In the sanctuary, right? So I'm distinguishing now, not just church, the church premises or the building, but in worship, in that quarter of the church, namely the sanctuary, where we worship on the Lord's Day in spirit and in truth. I want the saints, Bible, bread, wine, and water. That's what I want. High church in terms of the manner of our worship, the liturgy, but the elements of worship, a divine simplicity, a holy simplicity that makes much of Christ and does not deter or distract from him. If a church has Christmas trees in December in the foyer, no harm, no foul, and honestly, we're kind of leaning towards it ourselves. Okay.
All right. Thanks again, Mitch, for the support. Swinters007 sent a $10 super chat. Bill, I'm going to go ahead and pitch this one to you. Nathan, could you just minimize Zoom there so I'm able to see?
He's got to run. Bill has to run.
Okay, Bill has to
All
run.
right, Bill, thanks for being a guest. You did a fantastic job. As always, this is our third time's the charm. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, guys. Take care. God bless.
God bless. Okay, $10 from Swinters07. Go ahead, Wes.
All right. Are the times of my generation, so Gen Z in this case, this would be about 30 years and younger, so 30 years and younger, objectively, fundamentally much worse than the prior generation? Seems to be that way, but curious to what degree we might view the past with rose-colored glasses. That's a astute assessment that it's very easy to say everything was perfect 40 years ago. And to be honest, it wasn't. There's an objective metric that I would throw out just to, you can objectively say this changed, and that would be the ratio of median income to median wages. And I don't know exactly what it was then, but it was close to something like your home cost maybe twice what you took home annually.
No, so not income to wages, but
income
cost.
to home and median house costs.
Cost, yeah, okay.
So imagine you made $7,000, not adjusted for inflation, then. On average, median income to median home cost, it was about maybe twice as expensive. So $7,000 I took home a year, my home itself cost $14,000. That ratio has exploded. Median wages have not grown as much as median home cost. So now it could be 4, 5, 6, 7 times the amount. You can make $120,000 and your home to live just in a decent home in your area. Not super nice, not a ton of land. That could be a $600,000 home. So by adjusted, going back to the 60s, the 70s, I make $120,000. I live in a nice, affordable, spacious $240,000 home. Nope, $600,000. So on that one alone, housing, which, I mean, you live in your house. That is your daily experience. It is objectively much, 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 much harder to afford a good home.
Yep. I would say housing, also healthcare would be another. Yeah. Yep. That's the difference. So economically speaking, Swinters07, it's just, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Objectively harder to simply survive economically today. And that economic element plays into your ability to marry, your ability to have children, all those other things. So in that sense alone, it is much harder. This comes from Cody Lee Gallian. Okay. He gave us $10. We appreciate that, Cody. Thank you. He said, I listened to you and Nick. I lost track of him for a long time, but I'm grateful to come across your movement. And I should be able to come to the conference, our Right Response conference, with my family this next year. Thank you for being faithful and courageous. You are very welcome, Cody. We appreciate that. And then he followed it up with $5 more. Thanks again, Cody. He said, sorry for the misspelling. I am parking my 18-wheeler. No problem. We appreciate it. That brings us to the end of the Super Chats, and it also brings us to the end of the episode and the end of this week and the end of this month. So here we are at the very end. And Lord willing, we will see you on Monday, which I believe will be November 3rd. So November 3rd will be Monday. Again, our schedule is as follows. We live stream 3 times a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3 p.m. Central Time, simultaneously on 2 platforms, both YouTube and on X. On X, we are at Right Response M as a ministry, so give us a follow, click the bell, and on YouTube, just search Right Response Ministries. Make sure that you subscribe and click the bell, and we will see you, Lord willing, on November 3rd, Monday at 3 p.m. Central Time. Try to stay away from the grocery stores. Godspeed.